morning. Afternoon is what I meant to say. Having been mauled fighting in Normandy, the retreat across France and the West Wall, SS Division Das Reich was ordered back to Sauerland on the 12th of October 1944 to undergo some degree of rest, reinforcing, and refitting. The regiment finished arriving in Niedermarschberg on the 22nd of October. All that remained of the 1st Battalion was the supply company. The 2nd and 3rd Battalions lost 40 to 50%. After just 3 weeks, the regiment was ordered to Jülich as an alarm unit in case the Americans broke through around the area of Aachen. Attack training with live ammunition is conducted, and as conditions allow. At the beginning of December, the regiment rejoined the division west of Kulm. The 2nd SS Panzer Corps holds a conference and map exercise with all regiment division commanders outlining Unternehmen Herbstnebel, which means Operation Autumn Mist. Together with the Hohenstaufen Division, Das Reich comprises the offensive bulk of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps, the thrusting arm of the 6th Panzer Army, to recapture Antwerp and split the Allied armies. After the objective is accomplished, the British-American forces would be isolated from each other and could be destroyed or forced to evacuate. The regiment has 90% of its authorized troops and 60% of authorized vehicles. The 1st Battalion has been issued bicycles, has no winter clothing, some men have no coats, and their boots are in poor shape. The regiment is Comfort 2. After several postponements, the launch of Unternehmen Herbstnebel is finally set for the 16th of December. The High Command's General Staff calculated a minimum of 12 units of gasoline would be needed to reach Antwerp. A mere 2.5 are all that are on hand and issued. What fuel the division had was ordered handed over to the 1st SS Panzer Corps on the 15th of December. Even according to the optimistic timetable for the operation, Antwerp is supposed to be taken in 7 days of fighting, but only 5 days of ammunition is available and issued. Herbstnebel is depending on weather to render the aerial supremacy of the Allies moot, while at the same time counting on advancing armor divisions to capture Allied fuel depots to sustain their own advance. On the 14th of December, the regiment moved 45 kilometers from Fieldstolten to Lammerson.
The 589th Field Artillery Battalion normally had 509 men and officers with 12 105mm howitzers. On December 16th, the battalion position was hit by enemy artillery, and we fired many missions in support of the 422nd Infantry Regiment. At midnight, we had to move to avoid being overrun by the Germans, but lost 5 guns and the battalion commander. On the 17th, we had just finished setting up the guns when word came down German tanks were approaching. In the move, we lost 4 more guns. We moved 11 more times before being assigned to Baraque de Fraiture on December 19th. Major Arthur C. Parker III, being the senior officer left in the battalion, was commanding. He got orders to hold the Crossroads as long as humanly possible to protect the 106th Division supply route, deny the German advance the use of a clear N15 road to the objective, which we believe to be Liège. The N15, or Manhay Road, also happened to be a corps boundary with the 3rd Armored Division, 7th Corps on the west, and the 82nd Airborne 18th Corps on the east, thus not a particularly strong point in the American defensive line. Roughly 100 men with the 3 remaining howitzers moved into position. December 20th, 2 M16s and 2 M15s, the 203rd Anti-Aircraft Artillery Battalion joined the defensive effort. The maintenance, supply, and kitchen trucks and half-tracks of Troop D, 87th Reconnaissance Battalion, with the attached M8 assault guns, showed up at the Crossroads where they'd been ordered to bivouac.
The narrow roads through the Ardennes were jammed with supply trucks that had run out of gas. The badly needed deliveries of supplies, ammunition, and available reinforcement to the front lines are now reduced to a trickle. The regiment moved 34 kilometers to an area 2 kilometers east of Bourg, where there is a V1 launch unit firing all day and night. No Yabos were seen because of the foggy weather. Those would be fighter bombers. The 1st SS Panzer Corps had not achieved a breakthrough for the 2nd Corps to exploit. The 5th Panzer Army's penetration has created a very long right flank, with only the 560th Volksgrenadier Division to guard it. Field Marshal Model assigned flank guard to the 2nd SS Panzer Corps. The 2nd SS is to advance through the gap made by the 58th Panzer Corps and assemble northeast of Huxel. The division will relieve the 560th Volksgrenadier Division, seize the Salm-Chateau-Manhay line, turn west through Grand Mesnil, Erzay, and Derby, and cross the Eartha River to reach the Meuse River. The regiment marches 65 kilometers to the Ruland area. Our fuel supply is low. The 560th Volksgrenadier Division made probes in the Baraque de Fraiture, Odain, and Grand Mesnil area starting on the 19th of December. A 560th Bicycle Recon Patrol was sent up the road in the direction of Baraque de Fraiture. The patrol stopped at some mines before the road in the direction of before the Crossroads. While discussing what may lay ahead and how to proceed, several American 50 caliber machine guns opened up and cut them down. Further advance was impossible, and the remainder of the patrol retreated and reported back. The regiment crosses the Reich border near Dausberg at 11:30 hours and has just enough fuel to make it to the 54 kilometers to Bensfield area, with each vehicle towing another, and in some cases two. Most of the wheeled and tracked vehicles of Das Reich, a unit that's supposed to take advantage of the breach in the American lines and capture Antwerp, is immobile for lack of fuel. All across the front, the hopes that the American fuel depots could be captured and used to sustain our advance proves to be false. Only a few such captures have occurred. Any fuel depots that were not evacuated in front of us were alertly set alight by withdrawing American units.
The snow, wet masking fog, and freezing cold weather is the worst enemy most of the time to the soldiers dug in deep in their foxholes at night. Fighting the bitter cold and not being able to tell a tree stump from a sneaking German is bad enough. But when the quiet is broken, things change. The weather came in a distant second as the primary foe. Outposts report hearing widespread activity in the woods to the west, south, and east, hidden in the fog. Infantry attacks by the 560th Volksgrenadiers are repelled at 0530 and 1700 hours. The armored cars and jeeps of Troop D 87th Recon joined us between the attacks. M4 tanks, infantry, and assault guns of Task Force Kane 3rd Armored arrived to help us beat back the evening assault. The 87th and 3rd Armored units, except the assault guns, were ordered to leave. Captain Junior R. Woodruff and 116 men of Company F, 325th Glider Infantry Regiment, 82nd Airborne Division, arrived to strengthen the position. Late in the day, Lieutenant John Orlando's 3rd Platoon, Company A, 643rd Tank Destroyer Battalion, with 4 3-inch guns towed by half-tracks arrived. Major Parker was wounded that afternoon by a mortar barrage and was successfully evacuated. Major Goldstein assumes command.
Fuel trucks from the dumps in Colne finally begin to arrive. The momentum made at the breakthrough has been lost, as motorized units had to wait for fuel to be slowly brought up from the rear if and when it was available. The enemy will use this time to regroup in the area of the penetration and bring more units forward to halt our advance. Kampfgruppe Craig's Recon Battalion is the first refueled and heads off for the main road west of Salm-Chateau. The regiment with attached artillery battalion is ordered to reach the Petits Tals area in the afternoon and relieve the advanced detachment of the 560th Volksgrenadier, which are pinned down south of Baraque de Fraiture by American motorized and armored units. The 2nd Battalion leads off the regiment's march, followed by the 3rd Battalion and 1st Battalion in the rear. Back roads are used to reach the N15, the town of Huxel. My lead element arrives at nightfall and immediately makes contact with the 560th. During the night, the regiment relieves the 560th in the Baraque de Fraiture and Fraiture area. Kampfgruppe Craig is on the regiment's right side and Deutschland Regiment on the left.
Heavy mortar and artillery fire hit the Crossroads. In Lieutenant Orlando's tank destroyer position, one half-track and gunner almost immediately destroyed, and small arms fire started before the shelling subsided. German infantry overran the east side of the tank destroyer position. Somehow 2 guns limbers up and pulled out. The M16s and M15s of the 203rd AAA finally beat back the German attack. An officer and a sergeant leading a reconnaissance patrol are captured and identified as being from SS Division Das Reich. Since earlier encounters had been with a Volksgrenadier unit, and into the assault seems unlikely. After 5 days, the 589th Field Artillery Battalion has only 40 men and 1 howitzer left. Ammunition is running low, and there is no hope of resupply or reinforcement due to German units now completely surrounding the position.
After the 560th Volksgrenadier troops left, the regiment command post moved to Lataise. Strong 2nd and 3rd Battalion combat patrols took heavy fire from Baraque de Fraiture while enveloping the area and cutting the N15 road north of it behind the American defensive perimeter. Artillery fire is encountered for the first time and 12 tanks are spotted. The 2nd Panzer Abteilung Panzer IVs and Sturmgeschütz assault guns are assigned to the regiment and support the attack on the Crossroads. The sky clears around noon and American aircraft appear, so the attack will start at dusk, at 1500 hours after they return to base. After nearly 24 hours on the march, the 1st Battalion arrived and is dispersed around Petit Tails. Every one of their trucks is towing 2 others because of the lack of fuel.
I was injured by mortar fire that morning, but elected to stay with the men. Since there are no operable field phones, Captain Brown and Lieutenant Wright take turns to adjust the howitzer fire by running out to the crews from the command post in clear view of attacking Germans. This heroic but dangerous enterprise left them as casualties later in the day. During the day, 7 tanks from Company I, 32nd Armored Regiment, an infantry platoon from Company I, 36th Armored Infantry Regiment, and Company C, 509th Parachute Infantry Regiment joined the defense. With the lack of working communications, Major Goldstein left the position to report the critical condition and begged Colonel Richardson and Manhay for either reinforcements or extraction.
1st Battalion troops are in no condition to be committed to battle after their 38-kilometer foot and bicycle march, even with the heavy equipment carried in vehicles. The division's 10.5 centimeter and 15 centimeters howitzers will fire on the crossroad area for 30 minutes using all ammunition available. To distract the enemy's attention, part of 2nd Battalion will attack from the east and south. With the enemy distracted, 3rd Battalion will make the main assault from the west. Obersturmführer Horst Griesiak, in command of the 7th Company's 8 Panzer IVs, noted, "It was the most violent and toughest battle I had experienced in the entire war. As the panzers struck out to the right from the road, they reached a meadow and acquired a clear arc of fire on the defending American vehicles near the intersection. In rapid succession, from right to left, 8 trucks were shot up in flames. Tank turrets flew up into the air. It was hell, an inferno. It was a terrible storm, like the end of the world." Other advancing SS Grenadiers also noted, "Rarely was there such obstinate and close fighting. The enemy could not fail to be admired for fighting a defensive battle to the last man and cartridge at the vital position of Baraque de Fraiture. The American defense was fierce indeed, and it was not until well into the night that the objective was secured."
As the only officer left, I decided the men had given all they could possibly give, enduring 5 days of fierce attacks, constant shelling, and hand-to-hand fighting at the Crossroads position. Knowing the position was now completely surrounded by a vastly outnumbering force, the only fate that awaited these gallant survivors was to be killed or captured. Captain Woodruff finally received an order for his glidermen to withdraw, though for most of them it was too late. During a lull in the attack that night, I gathered the remaining 589th men, announcing it was time for every man to make his own decision as to their fate. I advised that the best course of action for anyone not wishing to surrender would be to try to make Manhay and the ground held there by the 82nd Airborne. I offered to lead any group that would like to stay together attempting to escape, but some members of the unit elected to take their chances alone and scattered into the woods in the general direction of the remaining American lines to the north. Many of those attempting to escape were captured by the surrounding Germans.
As Obersturmführer Griesiak finally approached the crossroad in the panzers, he noticed infantry in the road moving slowly. Through the smoke from the burning vehicles, dark and in the fog, he first assumed them to be his own troops, but recognized the helmets as American and noticed they were surrendering. He immediately ordered all fire stopped, opened the hatch, and climbed out. The ceasefire was immediate. Griesiak radioed, "The crossroads of Baraque de Fraiture is firmly in our hands." The survivors were taken prisoner, some of whom would later escape after a brief interrogation. Wounded from both sides were then treated. It took until the early hours of the 24th of December to completely secure the area. A battlefield survey found 17 tanks and 34 American half-tracks and jeeps destroyed or seized at a cost of 4 Panzers, and extraordinarily high casualties in our grenadier companies. The obstinate defenders of the Crossroads threw off the timetable for seizing Manhay completely. Regiment elements advanced north through the woods for Malentre, while Griesiak took his 4 remaining panzers up the N15 road to secure Manhay-Grand-Mesnil district and break through westward toward Erzay. Griesiak's panzers knocked out the lead tank of an enemy column at Belai Road and lost a panzer in the exchange of fire. With the road blocked, both sides found it impossible to maneuver in the dark through the dense woods. The regiment advance encountered fighting nearly as fierce as at Baraque de Fraiture. Casualties brought into the regimental aid station included not only men with gunshot and shrapnel wounds, but those suffering from frostbite and the effects of exposure.
General James Gavin, commander of the 82nd Airborne and 18th Airborne Corps, would years later write to Major Parker, "The stand at your defenders at the Crossroads was one of the great actions of the war. It gave us at least 24 hours respite. So I thank you for that and all the brave soldiers that were under your command. The time they bought with their selfless sacrifice at that position allowed the 7th Armored Division, 424th Infantry Regiment, 112th Infantry Regiment, and Combat Command B 9th Armored to hold St. Vith for 2 more days and to withdraw to stop the German advance, bringing an end to the last German breakthrough of the war. About 300 men held off a Volksgrenadier Division and SS Panzer Division for 5 days. To the troops that survived the battle of Baraque de Fraiture, it is known as Parker's Crossroads. Are there questions?
So I do have a question. Why did the Germans plan such an attack knowing that they didn't have enough fuel to begin with, and they were going to have to take the Allied fuel dumps?
At that point in time was the only order coming from above. So the only thing feasible was capture the Americans' fuel depots, because we're not going to be able to, move your fuel up in time, if at all. I mean, they could get it there eventually, but one vehicle with gas, they would take the gas from 3 vehicles, put it all in one, and have that one tow the other 2, and that was the most efficient way to move, which, as you can imagine, is not at all efficient. You can't
Remember
carry...
the picture of the roads they were moving on?
Yeah.
Impassable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that was the ground that they were supposed to conduct a lightning strike through. So they had to do it there because the Americans weren't expecting it there. And there was a good reason for that. There was no good way through, but it was where that they could locally concentrate numbers that would outnumber and overwhelm the Americans that were there. And most of the American forces that were there were just sentry forces. They were green. They were in a rest area. They didn't expect combat. A lot of them had never been in combat before, and the first time that, the gunfire started, they had no idea what to do, except for some units who, got it all together and figured it out and held up the Germans for 24 hours when really they should have been wiped out at once.
Yeah.
The Volksgrenadier divisions were not exactly what you would call an attacking force in a modern army, though. So the Americans were completely, the Germans were forced to completely misuse what little forces they did have in order to conduct any kind of an assault whatsoever. Volksgrenadier divisions are nothing compared to a battle-trained SS division which came through, and that's why that they tried to attack a little bit. They didn't get very far, and then here comes the SS division, and just kind of went whomp right through them. And that was what they were supposed to do when they had gas, but that didn't work out. They didn't have the fuel that was needed, and higher command would say, oh, take the fuel from this unit and put it over here, but I still want that unit to move up. Well, which?
So when I'm a little bit ignorant, but when you say a Grenadier division, what would that be equivalent to in the U.S.?
The Grenadier is an honorific title that's typical in Europe. Read infantry.
Yeah. So unmounted infantry, the majority of the time. Then there is Panzergrenadier, which is armored infantry. Okay. And those would be the mobile units and the half tracks and those kind of things. So a Panzergrenadier did have some mobility to it, but your average grenadier
Except
was...
in this case, where the demand of trucks in one battalion was on bicycles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Volksgrenadier divisions had two regiments. One regiment would be on bicycles. And you can imagine what it was like trying to ride across these. Bicycles in Europe, where the roads are good, are quite useful. But in the Ardennes, no. The bicycle stayed on the truck and you walked. You're not carrying the bike through that muck you saw there.
And hills.
To further on what Scott was talking about, when the Allies broke through in August 44, started the race across France, the Germans were moving all their big supply depots, fuel, ammunition, etc., to the east side of the Rhine River. Well, when this offensive started, it's still on the east side of the Rhine River. If you've ever seen the picture of the Rhine, that's no little trickle of water. You've got to get everything from the east side to the west side and then move it forward. They couldn't get the fuel forward fast enough. They had lost close to 100,000 trucks from January 44 up through the Ardennes. German industry couldn't replace all that. Plus, the German supply system is based largely on trains. The trains don't go much further forward than the Rhine River. You have very few train tracks between the Rhine River and the German border.
And the existing tracks that did cross the Rhine were alertly blown up by
Oh,
the
yeah.
American Air Force. So there was the Army Air
That's why
Corps
trying to
had
get
blown
across
everything.
that river
Yeah.
and then move it up further from there was just, it was enough. The experienced German officer knew this was going to be a mess. But you don't tell Adolf Hitler no. Not and expect to survive, literally.
I don't want to dominate this.
No, that's fine. We got plenty of time.
Okay, when I was reading the display yesterday, we talked about all the raids that were going, the bombing. It seemed like we couldn't bomb the troops there that much because of the fog and so forth that was there. But we were going further east and bombing
Logistics.
and fuel dumps and tracks and that.
Trying to shut down transportation, so
Yeah.
if we don't destroy the supplies, they still can't get them forward, or they can't get them forward fast. And that was the big value for air power, because of how bad the weather was. And if you follow it day by day, you look at the number of sorties we were mounting, see this huge number of sorties, 0, well, that's the weather closed in. Okay, everything goes to the rear areas on that day. Then the weather clears, back over the battlefield. So our air forces are very flexible. And you only got to send one recon plane up, and you know, yep, you don't want to fly in that, forget it, it's out, guys, you're not going to see anything. I'll never, probably one of the few things I got right in that dumb movie, The Battle of the Bulge, it's like flying around inside a light bulb. If you've ever come down through clouds as you're taking off or landing, you know what your visibility is. The pilots up there are not seeing where they're going, they're watching instruments on the panel. They didn't have that back then. You're flying by Mark 1 eyeball. So when the weather's bad, you either get under it, which means you're flying in between the hills and trees, not over them, or you're staying on the ground waiting for the weather to clear. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you touched on this briefly. My question is, was this totally Hitler's idea? And were there members of the German military hierarchy who saw this as just a temporary
Oh, there were,
setback?
I couldn't even go into, on the boards we did down there, I can't even go into all the Molo, Von Rundstedt,
Model of
everybody who's involved in this thing kept trying to convince it, you don't want to do this, we want to do this instead. They just tell him no, he said, let's do this instead. Couldn't be persuaded otherwise. You're not dealing with a sound mind. Be glad he was on their side. It helped.
Oh yeah, he had lost it.
More questions? Yes,
So
sir.
were all these folks that were in this on the American side, were they part of Patton's Third Army?
No.
These
Patton,
people all
way
came
to
in,
the south.
this is way to the south, so these guys all came in D-Day.
They're part of, no, 106 have only been in line 3 weeks?
So they came in weeks
These
after.
are,
Yeah,
yes.
they'd only been in the position 2-3 weeks.
Okay.
And these are combat inexperienced troops.
Yeah.
These are fresh guys from the United
Okay.
States, got on a boat to England, came across, and then here come the Germans.
Railroad carried up through as close and then marched the last distance into the line.
Well, as legend has it, my great uncle fought in it, but he was just he repaired guns behind the line.
It takes
Oh, yeah.
every last person to
And
keep
they-
a battle going.
And they sent him into the trenches.
Yeah.
Like it goes. And
Don't
that's how
count
he
that
got
at all.
shot.
Yeah.
He got shot with a 88, is that what the Germans had?
Well, they had a lot of different
artillery stuff.
pieces.
And he was not exactly like you said, he wasn't an experienced warrior. He
At
was
least
just
he
an engineer
survived. We had
behind.
no basic combat training in the U.S.
He had
Army back
0
then.
and he got thrown into a trench.
A lot of these guys were handed weapons. Here, this is your
That's
rifle.
exactly what happened.
And the last weapon they'd fire was an AUG-3 bolt action. You're handing him an M1. He didn't even know what it was, let alone how to load it.
Yeah.
Thus was the state of trade. It's the way, we had to build a real big army real fast. Corners get cut. we learned after the war. That's why you have basic combat training today.